Hey, how you doing? This is Chris over at 3D Palace, and this is probably a very impromptu MT set that's going to be absolutely filled, I would imagine, with interruptions and stuff. However, I'm going to do the best I can. Now, what I'm doing at the moment is basically planning out, well, not planning out, I'm actually doing the dry run for a lecture I'm doing on Wednesday for Animex. Now, the lecture itself is, funnily enough, roughly the same size as an MT. Give or take, obviously the students kind of work at their own pace, and they're going to be following along a lot of the time. Now, if I just, that's my iPhone. If I just go into my Explorer, I'm going to hope it doesn't open anything madly incriminating, like midgets or something. Let me see. Bear with me because I have a mad head cold at the moment. And I'm trying to remember which folder I put my stuff that I'm going to show you in. Projects, here we are. Now then, you should be able to see this. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some examples of good mechanical design and some examples of bad mechanical design. So first of all, let's cut straight to the the bad examples. And this is no disrespect to the artists, obviously, that have done this work. It's just, in my opinion, these are not great examples. Now, let's double click on the picture and give it a minute to load. It's probably going to be a Nero or something. Right, here's a good example. What's this? Gorilla Bot. Which seems to be running from some sort of weird hanging thing just here and walking on its knuckles. Now the problem with this one is, if you look, its entire weight mass is distributed on this one thumb here. Okay, so all of its weight is basically being held on that join there. Now from a sheer ergonomic point of view, what you're looking at here is something that's very, very, very difficult to get across as a model to the viewer. You may have a director who's kind of saying, oh, we want this gorilla bot, you know, and we want it to look like this concept art that we've got. The problem is, you're going to be hard pressed. I mean, look, you've got the thumbs here, in fact, pointing inwards as well, so it's not going to have any particular balance in the way that it's moving. I mean, maybe if it's swinging from branch to branch to branch, but if it's doing that, what's its purpose? It doesn't really have one, it doesn't really have a function either. It's ornate, don't get me wrong, it's a pretty design, but it's not particularly pleasing. Right, this is another good example. Now this one looks good. Don't get me wrong, I like this design. It's quite pretty. I like the way it's kind of hybridized between this kind of six-legged insectoid shape and stuff. But if you look closely, we've got no hips. Hips are very, very important. I'll explain more about this probably later on. However, you can't make do without your hips. This means that there's no way really for this to walk without it just tipping sideways. Okay, here we see another example of just complete, well, I mean, don't get me wrong, again, it's not a bad design. It's just, as a piece ergonomically, I would find this one not really satisfying for several reasons. It's just a gun carrier. It's got a gun at the front sticking out of its mouth, which is very kind of, pardon me, which is very kind of, oh, what's his name again? Geiger-esque. However, the entire pattern of the system, it's not really carrying it off. I like the rivets, I like the studs. I quite like these parts here with the reverse back knee, which is giving it some good flexibility. I don't like this here, this weird kind of piston drop down here to the toe. I think that's redundant, certainly. These parts here at the side, unless this hatch opens and something comes out, that's definitely redundant as well. And just having a machine gun sticking out the mouth's quite redundant. Okay, what is this? I don't know what this is. I can't even tell how this works. Is this a guy in a suit? Is this guy in a suit carrying some forks in his hands? Does he have some sort of weird kind of problem? I don't know what's going on here. This is completely superfluous on every single level. I presume this is some sort of an early Transformer type image, where it just models itself back into a sphere. And quite frankly, they were awful anyway. But as artwork, it's nice. Don't get me wrong. But as a robot piece, I don't like it. And this, what is this? I have no idea. I mean, look at it. Economically, it's a nightmare. Yeah, it's a nice piece of art. Don't get me wrong, but we've got all these curved shapes, and curved shapes work well in the Japanese style or the more modern kind of Sony style of mechanical, but this has no function. It's got a very, very thin tapered waist, which is a very weak point, so it loses a lot of cohesion artistically there and ergonomically there. Same here on these tiny joints here. A lot of thoughts being given into where the pivot points are, but no real thought as to how these are going to move. We've got these kind of weird spine parts. Never mix the ideas of, magic and fantasy with mechanical if you can help it, unless you're building magical, fantasy, mechanical, in which case you have to clearly define how things are going to operate. Okay, so let's go back to good examples. And I suspect this is a Feng piece. If you look, we've got a lot of definition here on how the hips are going to move. You've got a lot of strength down here on these pieces. The top here, I mean, the head's superfluous. They always are, though, quite frankly, with robots. Robots are always going to have superfluous heads, and I still stick them on. But we've got arms here with ammo loaders. Good sense of scale. You've got here these parts, which presumably denote a kind of piston and torsioning system for like keeping the legs level. You've got a good set of strength on the van brace, and you've got these well-defined hip areas here. Let's look at the next one. Okay, anyone who's seen the film Terminator Salvation will know this is the big thing with covered in guns that shoots motorbikes out of its legs, which is pretty damn lol-worthy. Just to use a internet meme there. But as a piece, it works fairly well, because you can see, even though it's a giant mech, it's been built as a giant mech to look moderately light compared to some of the more heavy pieces. You can see that we've got this kind of skeletal build here, which seems to be slightly more flimsy, but obviously isn't, than the standard Terminator models. It's got good heavy feet, which it leans forward onto. It's got a minigun held under its arm. It's got this weird pincer thing that I didn't like from the kind of bad design works, but we'll let it off with that. You'll notice it doesn't mess around trying to have too much of a head. It's got some sort of sensor array here. It's got a back hip here, so its knees are going to kind of stretch forward whilst its hip is pushing forward. Over here we've got a transformer design from a guy who I really like the work of. Name's completely slipped me for the moment, so I apologise, but he's actually got a DVD out with GNOME on as well, and it's a very good DVD set. This is one of his transformers, and you can see, I mean, he puts a lot of thought into how everything's going to work on this. You've got a supported rear set of pistons here for operating the knee, with a lot of strength on the knee itself. You've got a lot of central torso strength here, and whilst you can't exactly see from this picture where the detail is going to lie in for control movement, you've got the pistons here and here. We've got the main blades coming down here and here, which are the weapons. It's built for purpose, which is obviously small, speed, and it's got these big knife things coming out of its hand. It's an excellent design. And then, going back to a pure kind of Transformers design here, you've got Trailbreaker 3 by Jolin Gestages, which again, I mean, this is a straightforward kind of, pardon me, head-on design of a Transformer. Ooh, is this coffee freezing? I bet it is. Ah, rank. But again, you get a good idea looking at this. The only things that letting this down are these thin wrists here. Transformers tend to have thin wrists in a more traditional kind of transformery design before Transformers 1 and 2 came out. They've thickened those up simply because they cheat when they have them come out of the car shape. I mean, look at this. Car size, robot size. You know? Where'd it come from? We don't know. Okay, so we've talked some about the ergonomics. Now, a quick discussion on why ergonomics is important. The ergonomics of a 3D model is important simply because you are the artist, the animator, the rigger, whatever. If you're a freelancer, chances are you're all three. But you still have a client, and a lot of the time the client's going to say to you, "Hey Mr. Artist, I have a job for you. I would like you to model this. I've got you some concept art and I would like you to look over it and build it." And you're going to look at the concept art. And sometimes you're going to have, you know, a say in, well, I think this needs to be changed, it needs to be changed. A lot of the time, you're just going to be given the concept art and told you will get money if you get this right. The problem we have here is that directors see things from a very visual point of view, as do project leads or whoever's in charge of your project. They see it from a very kind of visual point of view. You don't often have someone who's not technically minded per se, but someone who's certainly looking at this from a how we're going to make this function point of view. Now, if you look, for example, and I'm going to go back to an old firm favourite of mine, Ed 209 from the film Robocop. Ed 209 from the film Robocop was great as a stop motion model. As a 3D model, the rigging on it was an absolute nightmare because we had two separate rigs on it, one operating that back knee that goes up and down, and one making sure that the leg goes forward, and then we had those tiny stubby arms as well. All in all, as I recall, the rig on it was, well, the rig on it would keep falling apart if it wasn't for the fact that we maintained it very carefully and had constraints put in it all over the place. As a design, the Ed 209 piece is an absolute dream. As a logistical, ergonomical piece, it's an absolute nightmare. And I think that's kind of what made the project fun. Because what made it fun was analysing it and working out how we're going to make it work logistically. Because of course it was never designed to work in 3D. The actual piece that they had on the set was a massive static model, or they used that small stop frame model. And with stop frame pieces, it's a lot easier, I would imagine, to kind of animate it moving it a little piece at a time, than it is to try and build an invisible skeletal rig in it with constraints where the knee flies off into infinite space. Another good example of this would be things like a Warhammer Dreadnought, if you look at the legs on those. I would imagine that when the guys at Relic were given a Dreadnought to model for the introduction sequence, they probably looked at that knee and just sighed to themselves and probably died a little bit because, again, whilst it is a firm, decent model, there's no real kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Explanation. There's no real clues as to how that knee is going to operate, because they've had artistic license with what is essentially a static piece. They've got kind of pistons all around it and things like that, and yet the game modelers then have to take this and make it into a working piece whilst keeping the original true spirit of the piece in the first place. Now, I do have the original sketch that I did of this leg that we're going to go over today, and it should keep you busy. The idea is fairly simple. We have a leg to hip. We have some simple toes. I'm not going to go to town on some of the detail. On other detail, we're going to knock ourselves out. We're going to do some modelling. We're going to do some rigging. We're going to even do some animating. And it's going to be basically an adventure for all of us, really, because I have a rotten head cold, and frankly, I may start hallucinating halfway through the tutorial set. Okay. Thank heavens for peanuts, eh? No, I don't mean Snoopy, although I like Snoopy. Okay. So looking at things first, where do we always start with a leg? Well, let me start with a leg. It's best, first of all, to rough it out. This is the Scaffold Mode. I think you might remember me talking about this in the past. Now, because I'm not building this from set measurements, I'm going to just make a one height segment cylinder here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it to 0 space, just there like that. Okay, next what I'm going to do, just bring it up a teeny bit, and this is going to allow me to make a second one just here. Okay, and then I'm going to make a third one just above it, and this is going to become the base of our foot, because I'm just going to increase the radius a little. I know it doesn't look much like the base of a foot yet, but give us time, it will. Bring this one up. This is going to be where our piston is, and I'm not using any naming conventions yet because we need just to basically get stuff working, Now this goes up to here, and this is the top of our knee, so shift and drag rather than just drag, and I'll reduce the radius again like that. Okay, and this goes to here. Okay, so that's our knee, believe it or not, here. This is actually our knee joint. This top part here we're going to put it into a box, so I'll just use auto grid, and we're going to be looking at ways of basically making that work soon. Then on top of this, I'm going to build another cylinder just here, and I'm going to pull my cylinder out and in like that. Told you it was going to get a bit noisy around here, didn't I? Okay, now press F4 so we can see what we're doing a bit better here, and this will give us the ability to start scaling pieces up as we need to. And I'm just going to increase the radius on that. It's very, very easy making our simple simple base meshes. Okay, now I'm going to pull that out to there and just reduce the height a little, like that, and then again like this. All we're doing really is just kind of blocking out the shape that we're going to be using. Okay, I mean you can make adjustments as you see fit, but this is kind of the shape that I'm going to be going for here. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look over here. This is where it's going to actually connect into a hip, and I'll have it come off this way. I don't know why, as a preference I tend to do things this way. I think it's just so left-handed. So I'm going to build a sphere out from the middle of this. And that's obviously going to be a ball join. And I'm going to reduce the amount of segments on that, maybe to about 24. Convert editable poly. Sometimes you have to. Move this a bit more to the middle. We can straighten it all up some more later. Okay, now pull this into the front view. Kill that off. And cap it out. Okay, now with that done, I'm just going to grab this. I can't just use basic prims for the entire lot, you see. I have to adapt some a little bit. Okay, that gives me that shape there. Now what I'm going to do is just pull another sphere just out of the middle of this, like that. And for the moment I'm just going to attach these two together. And then I can just move that up like so. Now when we get to over here, we're going to have a rather nice hip piece just coming in. I'll just build that there and up. Move it into the right area. Now I know at the moment this looks like unmitigated ass, alright? However, trust me, it will start to look better soon, I promise. We're just working nice and quick at the moment. Just getting stuff done. Okay, and that goes there like so. And then what we're going to do is have parts here and here. So our piston mounts come in to attach onto here. Now down here, what I'm going to do is just make a couple of small boxes that are going to end up being the toes. Remember, we're looking for strength in our toes as much as possible. Just give it a simple shape. 2 connects should do it. Okay, and down like that. Then in a bit. And again. Okay, now this obviously will give us more than one toe once we've duplicated it. So, have one there, one there. Turn on angle snap. Let's bring these back a bit. Now remember, this is by no means precise. We get to have lots of fun repositioning all this stuff soon. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to see how this is going to come together. Okay, so it looks like absolute awfulness at the moment, simply because the leg's not posed for a start. When the leg's in a dynamic pose, it'll look a lot better. But this is not a simple design for a leg by any means. However, it's an effective design for a leg that will eventually work. Now what we have here is a double-ended piston, okay, that's going to basically allow a lot more movement at the top than it does at the bottom. Surrounding this is going to be 4 pistons that will operate the knee, which will make it look a lot more armoured than it actually is. This is a single obvious solid block, which will connect here to a single pivot, which doesn't allow any flexibility in that movement, but then again, we don't want flexibility in that movement. Down here is a double jointed hip. Now, we can either have the hip as it is here, double jointed, which will give us a lot of flexibility, but it'll make it move a little bit like someone who's perhaps got hip problems, or we can isolate this so that it's a single solid hip coming out of here straight into this. Now I'm going to go with the second option, so all I need to do for that is just bring this straight down, and it'll save us a lot of heartache and problems later on, trust me. Pardon me, I'm sorry I keep coughing into the microphone. Okay, so if I just bring this straight down now, basically if you operate the entire top part now from this hip here, it'll move a lot better than it would do if you had a double-ended hip. Now, I'm not going to start posing this knee just yet, because we actually need to build everything that goes into making it. You can see which way it's going to kind of head forward. We've got 1 toe at the back, 3 toes at the front, which looks suspiciously like a chicken walker, to be quite honest. And chicken feet always give people the wrong idea. You should avoid them wherever possible. So what we could do instead is perhaps just take these 2 here, just have 2 at the front, like that, and at the back we could perhaps have 2 as well. Just turn on angle snap here. Now bear in mind, I'm going to have to be explaining probably a few times about angle snap and stuff like that. So you have the benefit that you can pause this, unlike the poor guys who are going to be doing my live class, where if I've drunk a lot of coffee, frankly, I'll be going about 90 miles an hour. So as you can see, we have a 4-toed affair here. That gives it a lot more of a universal movement. Or we take it back to 3 toes at the front, like so. We could have 3 toes there, but make the 2 toes. If I just rotate this round 180 degrees again, I think angle snap's still on. Oops, rotating that far too much. Hold down shift. Oh, I see, I'm rotating on the wrong axis. So rotate it that way. I'm not going to ask. I think 3D Studio Max has decided to throw a wobbler on me or something. Probably the pivot's out. Doesn't matter too much. Anyway, what I'll do is I'll just move this over here. Ooh, look at that. I think I'll reset the X form on this. That might help. No, it's a bit balked. Never mind. That's probably just my 3ds Max playing up. Rather than having Max crash on me, which it probably will. What I'm going to say is, it's up to you how you want to position the toes. You might want to consider this as a separate part of the actual tutorial slash lesson slash MT, whatever. What I'm going to say to you is this: if you're following along with this, and holy God, that's a lot of snow I'm looking at outside my window. Sorry. If you're following along with this, you got to think about built for purpose, which is a Lucas term. What that means is, what has this been designed for and why? Now, if you're going to be using a lot of defensive attacks with the foot, perhaps you'd want 2 claws at the front, 2 claws at the back, especially if you want to be nimble and picking things up. For speed, then perhaps you're looking at 3 claws at the front, 1 at the back, like a chicken walker. For stability, you're looking at 1 at each 90-degree angle, so you've got a complete splay of feet, which is what I'm going to go for, incidentally. You could also have you could also have just like 1 large one at the front and 1 smaller one at the back, if you're going for a more traditional heavy combat look, although that will look a teeny weeny bit unstable, because it has to balance everything on that 1 toe at the front. But then again, remember, of course, you have to work out how you're going to splay all 3 toes anyway. So it is up to you. I'm going to go with basically the design that has 4 of them going, at 90-degree angles to each other, because that's a nice traditional design and it works fairly well. Okay, so in the next section, we're going to start fleshing this out and making it into a piece that we can actually use, and that means basically adding detail to, or rebuilding rather, the entire main area where the pistons are. So when we start doing that, I'll see you then. Bye bye for now.